Hi everybody. I'm making this video both as a social experiment, but also to show you something that we've known for years, but I think it has the dual distinction of being one of the most compelling, incontrovertible pieces of evidence for evolution, and yet also one of the simplest that can be presented and one of the simplest to understand. So it's it's so compelling and at the same time so easy to comprehend that there really is nothing an evolution denying creationist could possibly say to counter it, certainly not with any credibility. And then, as I say, it has the dual distinction really of having the sort of added intrigue of a social experiment because it presents the question, what can people who have no interest in the truth of evolution possibly say when they are presented with evidence like this? So I'm just going to share my screen because I've been very kindly given access to a couple of images from the wonderful BioLogos Foundation to share with you. You can probably see them on the screen there. So let me explain what this evidence is and what it all means and why it's so compelling. So it comes in a threefold way, really. As we've covered before in previous blogs and articles and videos too, there's absolutely no doubt, and there hasn't been for a long time, that the genetic story shows one of common ancestry between all species in a nested hierarchy of relatedness. Um, so one of the simplest but easily verifiable steps that we can take is to look at humans and chimpanzees and gorillas and orangutans. So chimpanzees are actually more closely related to humans than they are to, say, gorillas. And you can see the illustration here, which is a fascinating discovery in itself. Gorillas are more closely related to humans genetically than they are to, say, monkeys, who would be somewhere down here on the on the graph. And we know this because we've mapped the genomes of virtually all species out there in the animal kingdom. So thank you, BioLogos, for this image that I'm sharing. I'm sharing this with permission. So a study on shared mutations between the great apes, their olfactory receptors, the genes for that have obviously they're for the sense of smell, and these proteins, they bind to air molecules in the nasal canal, and they send signals to the brain to perceive smells. Now, primates have lost many of these genes, sharing identical mutations in the process. I think there are about 12 that have been found in total so far. And this pattern here, you can see, it shows that mutations occurred before each species diverged, and this is what this illustration shows, without repeated events. So other mutations in blue here are unique to individual species, so they're unique to the single species, but it shows quite clearly the fact that there are identical mutations shared by humans and chimps on this lineage, and by humans, chimps, and gorillas in this, and by all of the four species on this. It shows beyond any doubt that this is a nested of hierarchy of relatedness, that these primates are related and the mutations show how they are related. And now the next one's even more interesting for me, I think, because this is what's called the gulo gene or the pseudo gene. So in the evolutionary story, we once had vitamin C synthesis genes, but with a fruit-rich diet, these genes started to become unnecessary because we got our fruit from other sources, our vitamin C from other sources. So energy saved from not producing vitamin C could be redirected to activities like finding food or mating, giving the survival advantage once our diet provided enough vitamin C by itself. So by comparing species DNA, we observe key differences again. And many species have retained the genes for vitamin C synthesis. And in humans, for example, remnants of these genes, which are now non-functional due to the mutations, and they were discovered during the DNA sequencing. So other simian primates have the same broken gene with identical mutations, which again is more confirmation of shared ancestry. Now, some primates do still have the vitamin C genes intact, of course, because the insects, and I think the last common ancestor with insect-eating primates lived around 40 million years ago at the split, and some primates alive today do have a functioning gulo gene, allowing them to synthesize vitamin C as well. I think the split between primates that do and the rest was about 60 million years ago, which is symbolized by this point here. So 60 million years ago. Within the primates, which of course include humans, chimpanzees, orangutans, the split occurred, as I said, 40 million years ago, where the common ancestor lost the functionality of the gulo gene. And this group of primates typically still relies on dietary sources. Now, this is fascinating stuff because you have to understand what this evidence means if you're a creationist who is under the severe misapprehension that we are not genetically related. Um, you know, the fact that we share the same broken gene in the same chromosome position with the same mutations, it means that common ancestry is the only viable explanation. Just think about that. We share with other apes the same broken gene in the same position on the same chromosome with exactly the same mutations in exactly the same position on the gene. Now, it's found the gulo gene is found in other primates, which include humans. It's found in chimpanzees, as I said, orangutans, bonobos, I think gibbons, baboons. If you're a creationist watching this, you are seeing plain evidence available to look up for yourself in far more detail if you want, that confirms without any doubt the same mutations in the vitamin C synthesis genes are found in the same genomic locations in both humans and other simian primates. And you can't say, but that just means God used the same genetic code, as some creationists try to say, because that doesn't mean anything compelling in this context. It means you don't have the first clue about what this means if you say something like that. Plus, they're remnants of once functional genes, now disrupted by mutations, appearing in trackable form on the aforementioned primates in the nested hierarchy, as we've seen by the image. So it's impossible to care about what is true here and still reject evolution. It's a clear example of adaptation through natural selection, and actually also one of the simplest pieces of evidence you will ever encounter, and expressed so simplistically with this graph. It's established scientific evidence repeated consistently with every study that shows the mutation that disrupted the gulo gene, that it became fixed in the population because it conferred no advantage in an environment where dietary vitamin C was abundant because of our ability to source it elsewhere. It proves common ancestry beyond any doubt. And like I showed in my video on the genetic relatedness in the co-ancestry coefficient, which I could post in the description below, here too, we have a nested hierarchy of variants that fits exactly as we'd expect on a tree of life. One final point I was going to raise. I was given this by a creationist, an article which purports to counter the claim of the pseudo gene, the Gulo pseudo gene, but it's absolutely nonsensical. Um I could actually add one more thing, which I don't have permissions for the image, but I do have, before we get on to the article, actually, I do have, um, there's strong evidence which are called endogenous retroviruses, which are very commonly known in the scientific um, disciplines. They're called ERVs for short. So an ERV it's a type of retrovirus that's integrated its genetic material onto the genome of its host organism, and it's passed through generations. In other words, it's exactly mappable on species in their lineages in the same way that these two examples are, and it's ERVs are they're undeniably there in appearance on different genomes in different places, and as you would see from the image of the evidence, if I had it, but by all means look it up yourself. There are so many examples. I just haven't acquired the permission to share them on a video. But there are ERV insertion points inherited in all these different lineages in a nested manner, which means that ERVs, again, they present a nested hierarchical pattern in the same way outlined in my video on the genetic relatedness of mutations in the video below. The inheritance pattern occurs during infection when ERVs are integrated into the host genome, when they're passed on through reproduction. And as you'll also see, when species diverge over evolutionary time, newer ERV insertions occur independently in the genomes of each species due to the retroviral infection. So along the way, some ERVs may be lost from one lineage due to genetic drift or selection pressures, or making them then unique to specific lineages. And as we've said in the last video, sequencing whole genomes of primates means we now know that, say, chimpanzees are more closely related to humans than they are to gorillas, as we said before. And we also see the ERVs on the unique lineages, but not on others. And we'd obviously see different heritable mutations, of course, when we track those differences. And we also know, as I said, that gorillas are more closely related to humans than they are to, say, monkeys or gibbons. For the same reason, if humans and chimpanzees, going back to this image, if humans and chimpanzees share certain ERVs at the same genomic loci, but say orangutans don't share those same ERVs, it demonstrates a closer evolutionary relationship between, say, humans and chimpanzees than between humans and gorillas. It's impossible to know this and understand this and still deny that all primates are genetically related, including human beings. And once you accept the evidential and trackable genetic relatedness between humans and other primates, and ultimately all species, it becomes easy to accept the nested hierarchy of genetic relatedness and to confirm that evolution is the truth. So going back to this article, it's entitled the Human Gulo Pseudogene: Evidence for Evolutionary Discontinuity and Genetic Entropy. And what this creationist article has done, it's presented an argument against the interpretation of the Gulo pseudogene with these claims that I've highlighted from the article. Now, I'll just talk you through them. I wanted to include this because what I didn't want is for someone to watch this video, then either give it to a creationist or research it, and then find this and think, oh well, it's already been refutable. No, it hasn't. So let's just look at the claim. So the 28,800 base Gulo region, the humans is only 84% and 87% identical to chimpanzee and gorilla, respectively. The upstream regions show even lower identity. Well, I'm sorry, but this is just wrong even at the basic level. Sequence identity percentages alone do not negate common ancestry. Evolutionary theory predicts that sequences diverge over time due to mutations, insertions, deletions, and other genomic alterations. The observed sequence identities, they fall within expected ranges given the divergence times between these two species. Evolutionary theory predicts that sequences will diverge over time due to mutations and other genetic changes, but the reported sequence identities are well within expected ranges given the divergence between humans and those primates. Common ancestry is supported by a multitude of genetic evidence, including conserved sequences and shared genetic markers, and many of the phylogenetic analyses beyond simple sequence identity percentages. So it just won't do it. It's just dishonest. Second claim, different exons of the Gulo pseudogene show discordant phylogenetic patterns, undermining the idea of the common ancestry. Again, a very misleading claim. Genetic phenomena can cause discordant phylogenetic signals, and what's happening is that the ancestral genetic variation is randomly distributed among descendant species, leading to gene trees that don't perfectly match the species tree. But it's just completely false to say that this undermines the idea of common ancestry, and nobody who is honest and who understands genetics competently would make such a claim. Claim 3 is that many pseudogenes, including Gulo, may have functional roles, contrary to the evolutionary view that they are broken genes. Well, I mean, while it's true that some pseudogenes have been found to have regulatory roles, the Gulo pseudogene in humans is definitely not functional. It's definitely not functional for vitamin C synthesis, for example. So, and as I've already explained, we know why. I explained that 10 minutes ago. Even if the gene has a functional role in other contexts, it doesn't negate its pseudo gene status regarding its original function. The next thing, that the degradation of the Gulo gene is evidence of genetic entropy, where genomes are gradually deteriorating over time. Excuse me. Again, this is the kind of things that creationists say. It's one of those laws of. It's very easy to state a nonsensical proposition, but it takes a lot more time and effort to refute it. But it's just the sort of thing that a creationist who's not very well versed might think is convincing, genetic entropy. But as we've seen from what I presented earlier, the species that obtain sufficient vitamin C through their diet can lose the need to synthesize that internally or endogenously, as the term is here, leading to the Gulo gene being classified as a pseudogene. But genetic entropy, it's a bogus concept proposed by creationists or some creationists, suggesting a kind of a decline in information over time. But not only is it not supported by mainstream genetics, there's no steady decline in genetic information leading to the deterioration of of genomes over time. It's just false. It's simply not true. The most we can say is that there's an accumulation of deleterious mutations alongside natural selection, which removes harmful mutations and maintains or increases genetic fitness in the populations, but that's not genetic entropy. And in my experience, no creationist who ever suggests it has much of a clue about how to define the concept of information properly, let alone entropy. It's just really, really poor, I think. Ape genomes are assembled using the human genome as a framework, including bias that makes them appear more similar to humans. Well, again, it's just a lie. Comparative genomics uses these independently assembled genomes to study evolutionary relationships. It's just not true. There's the greater similarity of the gorilla Gulo region to humans compared to chimpanzees contradicts the inferred phylogenetic order. No, it doesn't. Phylogenetic relationships, they're inferred from comprehensive analyses of multiple genes and genomic regions, not from single gene comparisons. The overall phylogenetic framework, supported by extensive genetic data, it robustly places humans and chimpanzees as closer relatives to gorillas, and it's easy to research this independently of this video to show that. The claims made in this creationist article, they just reflect a fundamental misunderstanding of evolutionary principles and genetic processes, especially as the writer seems oblivious to the dynamic nature of genomes, and it just uses language to distort the truth and just tell lies, basically. So I hope that's been helpful. That's probably the most compelling and yet at the same time straightforward evidence for evolution that there is. And I say it's an interesting social experiment, because how people respond to this shows how much they care about the truth and how willing they are to engage with it. Creationists, if they can't get away with sharing that baseless article, which I've refuted deliberately to stop that happening as a response to this, then they'll either usually ignore the evidence, or they'll say something silly, like I said earlier, that about the nature of God's creation of DNA and stuff. But you'll know if they do that they're just not to be taken seriously. So this is my video for this time. It's offering something that's compelling, truthful, and easy to digest. And this will go on my comprehensive article, which is going to be a compilation of all the strongest reasons why we must reject young Earth creationism and accept evolution alongside our faith. Thank you for watching, and tune in next time. And the links to the articles and videos I mentioned will be in the description below, as well as a link to my blog. So please do tune in. And if it registers and if you like what you see, then please do think about subscribing. It really helps. The more subscribers, the more of a following and more traction we can get, and hopefully increase the following and popularity. So thank you for watching and listening, and I will catch you next time.